give you a heads up when.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so, oh,
Matt's here.
Yeah, you can just click them in.
Awesome. Hi, Matt.
Might take a minute.
All right, so Fiona, if you wouldn't mind, I'll just talk about the agenda.
Sure.
Thank you. So I had sent you guys an updated snapshot of the survey, and we're just going to kind of see what changed, if anything, from the previous snapshot I had sent you, because we had decided at the last meeting in May to extend it, to give it another push. And personally, I think it was worthwhile, but I'll let you be the judge of that. And then I want to talk about the goals and strategies, kind of what I think might need to change based on some of the open responses and based on some committee feedback that we received. And also, just if you recall during the May meeting, there were a couple things that we said, you know what, that actually sounds kind of redundant. Those strategies could probably be combined. So I just have some suggestions for tonight, and then we can decide where we want to go from there. I'm curious to see what you have to say. And then next steps we will talk about. So Judy sent out this afternoon the economic development inventory and assessment, and the matrix for giving feedback, which you'll recall you had previously done on the transportation and the natural and cultural resources and open space. So if anyone needs like a refresher on what we'd like you to do with those, you can certainly reach out, but it's pretty self-explanatory. So we'll be talking about that at the end. If anyone else has a problem with it, like if the file was too big or anything, let me know and I can try and get it to you another way. Okay? All right. So we can move on, Fiona. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. Okay. So just the first, was it worth it extending the survey? Well, I'll let you be the judge. So May 7th, we had, it's kind of tricky because there were a fair amount of people who actually didn't complete the survey. And we see this a lot. Your completion rate is not always the same as the people who take it to start. People, give up and walk away during the survey. So on May 7th, 174 people had opened up the survey to take it. And 131 of those people had responded to the actual strategies questions, which was the point of the survey. Robinson. Okay. Shall I admit this person?
I just did.
Okay.
It's a public meeting. We have to admit everybody. So.
Yep. All right. And then through May 31st, we had 173 responses to those strategies, which was a 32% increase altogether. So I thought that was pretty great. There weren't a ton of shifts you'll see on the next slides, but there were 30 new open responses, with the biggest jump in the economic development. There were 9 additional open responses in that one. So if you wouldn't mind advancing, Fiona, to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so I just wanted to point out what happened with the strategies for the land use. Those percentages that you see are the percentages through May 31st, right? And I just point out where some notable differences were. In particular, the biggest jump was for improving online presence and organization to ensure that zoning information and maps are easily found. And when I say 5% increase, that's like relative to all of the strategies. That's the increase. It jumped from 35% of respondents to 40%. And then you'll notice I have 2 that were flipped. So when we first looked at May 7th, the ensuring that board members receive sufficient training and improving the online presence, those were in opposite order during the previous one. Okay, so, but otherwise, I thought it was interesting that the top 5 of the strategies remained the top 5 with just that little flip. Now, I'm going to leave the next slide up for just a minute. And what you'll see on the next slide, it's the open responses. And you would have seen them already. They were on the PDF that we sent out. But I specifically took out the ones that were new. So in case you didn't get a chance to read them, I'll leave that up for you for just a minute. But these comments our new open response ones. Sorry. Personally, I thought the first one was interesting. It's not just the suggestion of looking at what has worked in the past versus not within Bridgewater, but looking at towns kind of in the surrounding area for what has worked for them with regard to land use and zoning. There was a lot in the open comments just throughout, just a lot of comments about, you know, we're expanding too much and we can't sustain what we already have. And that comes up in multiple elements. So that sense of, you know, oh, Carlton, comment?
Yeah, that's the only thing I picked up that was major. I didn't do the inversions, but the 5% was the main thing I saw. Everything else was plus or minus 2%.
Yep, exactly.
But I find educating boards and commissions kind of a theme. And I can't quite figure out where that's coming from other than people themselves don't understand. Do they think the boards? Do we think that the people think the boards are not doing correctly, or I don't know what's driving that.
So the other thing that, and I saw this in some of your comments as well, you know, that in some of the elements, it's an issue of public education in several of these elements. So you'll see in some of my like suggested revisions of some of the strategies that, you know, because we saw that come up so much in open responses and you know, just that need for educating not only the boards but also the public. I think that we do need to really, in probably every element, can find a way to address that. I agree that that is a theme that kind of rang throughout. Does anyone else have any other comments or questions about the land use strategies or shifts or anything? Okay, so then if you want to go to the next slide, Fiona. This is by no means, you know, set in stone. One of the things I'm going to ask you to do on whatever time frame we decide is I will send you the PDF of the slideshow again so that you have my revised strategy suggestions. But I just tried to look at ways to collapse some of these. And so I tried to color code it as best I could. So these are the current strategies, and they're going in order of the ranking that people, how people rank them. So the second and third ones on the current strategies, I feel like they could kind of collapse because they both speak to the idea of the public wants information. They want education on zoning, on land use, and they also want to be able to find that information. So I felt it was kind of redundant, could be collapsed down, something along the lines of, and again, this is just, you know, my thinking about it a little bit, improve public access to zoning information and education through improved availability and online access of zoning related materials. And then other outreach, you know, I don't know how far the town would want to go with that, but it's not, you know, not everyone is looking for education online. Maybe there's some, you know, in-person education or print materials or just something that helps ensure that the public is not only educated on zoning, but also knows where to find the information. It's easily accessible. So I thought we could try and find some way to collapse those two. The only other two that I thought could maybe somehow be collapsed, if you kind of want to think about it a little bit, is the reviewing the rules and regulations of boards to improve efficiency and communication, and ensuring that they receive sufficient training. You know, if there's some way, you know, that to ensure that they receive sufficient training in, you know, regularly updated rules and regulations or something, you know, just think about it. And in general, I think that, you know, if you look back several months ago at where our goals and strategies were, just the amount that we've been able to kind of condense them, I think is going to just make the whole document more clear. And another thing that we'll see in some of the other elements is that some of the things that we currently had as a strategy, I think will come out also more in the opportunities and recommendations and things like that. So any thoughts about ways to potentially collapse some of these, or do you want to think on it?
I think those two that you mentioned, the ensure training and then the rules and regulations. I can see there's a way of collapsing those.
Yeah.
Because it definitely seems, it's like, it almost, for someone reading this, it's almost a little bit redundant.
Yeah. So we'll play with that some more, and I'd love to hear from all of you before the next meeting as well. Anyone who has some additional thoughts on how we can make that more concise, that'd be great.
Let me chime in on 2 points while we're on this particular subject. I like the condensation, but I'm not sure. I don't know how you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And that's what education here does. But I think maybe having some kind of thing would be good as an action. The other piece is that since the zoning regulations have been, we've been being worked on and have now been delayed some more for some more changes. Now going forward, what is our role going to be on this? You don't have to answer right now, but the question becomes, if we're not moving forward fast on the update to the zoning, are we going to deal with the lower boundary question, or I just don't know what we can do and how it plays in.
Okay. Okay.
If Jennifer has a thought on it or not.
Well, I would assume that this committee will provide recommendations for implementation that will answer some of those zoning issues that we've had, that will help address some of those zoning concerns. So I don't think what may or may not happen with the zoning that you're referring to that happened last week will affect this committee's work at all, Carlton.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the reason I put on the revised strategy suggestions, just a little pondering face next to reviewing the boundaries of use districts, kind of touching on what you were talking about. I did get a comment just about, maybe these goals should be focusing less on that and more on public education and sustainable development and things like that. So when you're thinking about the relevance of the strategies, maybe, keep that in mind. Fiona, would you mind moving to the next? Thank you. So for transportation and circulation, there was no shift in the order. The top 5 remained the top 5 in that same order. The biggest increase was in the third one. There was a 5% increase on the suggestion about building parking structures and garages. A 3% increase in creating, maintaining, and promoting pedestrian and bicycle friendly infrastructure. And that's clearly still the top priority. So if you wouldn't mind moving on, Fiona. Thanks. So these were the other comments that were new from when we first looked at the survey to now. I feel like the amount of comments, I was just surprised to see, the comments both when we first looked at the survey and now just about the dislike of the Rotary. And it's interesting, because that we didn't even have that in our strategies or anything. So one of the things I'm going to ask is, how do we, what do we make of that? The fact that there were several open comments about that. But I'll leave this up for a minute since these were new comments, and I'll have you just take a minute.
I know everybody thinks the university can be the end all and do all for the most part. I think it's an education issue. I work with the university on a couple of issues and committees, and I think it's a matter of people not understanding what the college, actually their function is. And I think people like to blame the college traffic, and they like to blame the parking issues. And I know for a fact that the college has addressed the parking issue, but place. So a parking lot, garage. And I'm trying to figure out how we can address the question about the college. And I don't know if that's in some of the introductory chapters, that kind of thing. It's not just the town. It's a lot of pass-through traffic. That's the issue. So from that perspective, And college should build a parking garage? Duh, they did. The fire location station, I think that's a really interesting thing that may get more addressed underneath the town hall, formerly known as the townhouse way back when, study that's going on there and what happens there. So I would not like it to be more parking spaces, quite frankly.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
my
right.
comments on this one. I'm assuming we're being recorded, so I don't
Yes, we are.
submit. Thank you.
I think what Carlton was saying about the parking, the fire station, that is kind of like one of the things that the town hall study is like, what if that was added into the mix of like the town hall expanding into the fire station area. So I think for that, that might not be the place for the parking garage that we're looking for. And I don't think the Rotary's going anywhere.
Yeah.
A little bit of history on that place.
By the way, what is the status of the two studies that were commissioned by the town? One was to look at a number of intersections from a safety perspective, and the other one was to actually come and address three potential options for dealing with the common and the transportation around that. What is the status of that? I know it's not in our purview, but it does affect what we think and what we end up recommending. What's the status?
They've been completed and they're in the town manager's office.
So they haven't been made public yet?
Not to my knowledge, but you can check with him.
Thank you.
So I just want to say that perhaps it is incumbent upon the university to educate the people of Bridgewater as to our parking. And maybe the best way to do that would be to put something out on the residents' Facebook page, or maybe even the town's web page and Facebook page, because we have apps now where students know where parking is available. The beginning of the year isn't quite the mess that it usually is. So I think we need to educate the town on what exactly we are doing. We do have a parking garage. Most of the time it's not even full, so there is plenty of parking on campus. Students are aware of by the app where there is parking, so when they come in, they know where they can go to park. So I think it's gotten better, and we've done, the best we can. If students don't want to park there and they think it's closer to park in the 99 parking lot, they're going to try and do that. But for the 2 weeks of the year and the beginning of the year, we post an officer there and pay for it. So I think maybe we need to do some education on exactly what we have as far as the parking. And I'll put that to my vice president. That might be something that will be helpful, just, not really to do with this, but something that, because of what's said here, maybe we need to do that.
I think wayfinding is going to help out too, because right now, like that garage, the parking lots behind the common, like behind Lucky Star and everything, you can't even see the sign to go into that. So I think bringing wayfinding into the mix is going to definitely help people find and know where the parking is.
That's an excellent point. And we had tried to do some wayfinding and other things, and we actually had a grant to do that, and I think it needs to be revisited. But thinking about this, what was just said by Sue, is that an immediate action on the university's part, or does that become go to an action that we put in the master plan? I'm not sure what level it rises to. I think the immediate is good, but does it come into the master plan to play at some point?
Well, if it's an action of the university, it's not part of our master plan.
Well, I take some exception. An action could be for the university to continually educate the town on parking.
But we can't dictate to the university what they do. So we can't put in our master plan that the university is going to do something.
They're our partner. I take exception.
Can I ask what an ERI is? Sorry for my ignorance on that. What is it?
Environmental impact report.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We've done a lot of traffic studies, so I'm not sure what they're referring to, but that's okay.
they're looking for a total environmental impact report, which is generally required for any project is of major scope. For example, the removal of the bridge and the dam on High Street has gone through an EII preliminary environmental impact report stage. And that's the kind of thing. They're looking at all the environmental impacts, including traffic and, CO2 and emissions and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. I'm sorry, it makes it sound like we've never done this. I mean, I have some in my office that have to do with when we built the Moakley Center, and I have the environmental impact reports on a lot of the things we've done in the past, but someone obviously doesn't know that.
And I don't know how to educate other than, again, have this education thing coming.
I know.
So when the university does an environmental impact report, it's, excuse my ignorance on this, but then what, does the town have any obligation to share that as well? Or is that just, that's housed by the university and that's,
It's a university state thing,
Okay.
We're a state entity, we're required to do certain things. And so we do those things. And we're regulated by the Division of Capital Asset Management. So they're kind of the ones that tell us what we need to do when we go into a project like that.
Okay. Okay. All right, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, so if you wouldn't mind moving on, Fiona. So just some of the things that I thought could maybe be condensed. The first two strategies, create, maintain, and promote pedestrian and bicycle-friendly infrastructure through continued implementation of the town's complete streets policy, rather than having those as two separate bullets. The issue with the parking, Carlton, you brought up a good point about perception versus reality. And we see this a lot in communities where, there might be an actual parking issue and sometimes it's perception. And so, I'm not really sure how to address that. I tried to kind of encompass that a little bit by also talking about public education, but explore creative ways to mitigate parking issues, including allocation of resident parking downtown, construction of parking garages, just because that was pretty highly voted, public education and other parking management solutions, trying to kind of keep it open-ended, letting the public know we recognize that this is a source of frustration for the community, and that it should be continually explored and investigated. So trying to kind of consolidate those two bullets and also bringing in that sense of the need for education as well. So
I realize you color coded the condensation in different colors.
oh yes, I'm sorry, I should have explained that. Yeah, so the two blue bullets were condensed into the one blue bullet over there. And then on the bottom, the three kind of darkish brown ones are consolidated somewhat in that one. So to me, I felt like the last three bullets of the current strategies all kind of come together for just promoting less car-centric, more modern transportation to reduce vehicular traffic, and creating just more sustainable travel options that reduce carbon footprint and things like that. And so I was just trying to kind of put those together in a way without losing any of their urgency, encourage the adoption of advanced transportation modes, efficient public transit, and other sustainable transportation solutions. So, again, those are just kind of ideas I was throwing out to see if some of these could be consolidated and then explored in more detail in recommendations. So if anyone has thoughts.
I think they're good as a transportation person. I have to, at first blush, it looks more positive.
Okay.
Less choppy.
Okay. And then, again, the thing with several comments coming up about the center and the chaos of the Rotary and how it needs to change and things like that. I don't know how or if that should be addressed, that, the public has, concerns about the Rotary. What are the committee's thoughts as residents of the town?
Well, the potential redesign of the Rotary's kind of addressing the downtown plan that was made. Nothing definitive that we're going forward with, but it's been addressed in that particular study. But again, a lot of that's indicative of what the state will allow, since 28 runs right through that rotary. So we might not be able to do the ideas and plans that we have for the rotary, so without state approval.
But we own the Rotary. They own up to the church, and then not until Dunkin' Donuts. So does it, like, we'd be able to? I think that's still something that we might have control over.
Yeah, well, I think the state still has to prove any kinds because it intersects. So they have significant, and they may or not fund things. So I think they have a big role.
Yeah. But if we are implementing the complete streets policy, that ties into like curb cuts and traffic calming measures. So I think that's where we can kind of like address that, because that's the biggest thing, is calming traffic in the downtown, not making it a rush through.
That's a good point.
Well, we can always refer to the potential details of those plans within, this plan. So without specifically spelling it out, just say, refer to the plans made in the downtown revitalization plan and the clean streets plan.
Yep.
And the new traffic study that's apparently been submitted but not available yet.
Yeah. Okay. There are other places, as I was, looking at these again, where I could. There are definitely places where we can be referring to other plans that I think connect nicely with these. So, okay, thank you. All right, do you mind moving on, Fiona? So for housing, some of them flipped around. So what's currently the first and third goal or strategy, were flipped. And the bottom two of the top 5 were also flipped. So, but not much change, the percentage increase and decrease, it's not hugely significant. But I did think it was necessary, I wanted to point out that some of those did change in order. Okay, if you could move on, Fiona. Okay, so these were some of the other comments that were new from the first time we looked at the survey. I'll let you take a look at it.
So is anybody interested in a housing building moratorium? That went down in flames 25 years ago.
Well, there's so many, when I was alphabetizing the open responses, the amount that began to stop building houses, there was quite a big chunk, but I think we try and address that in the strategies that we'll talk about in the next slide.
And the McElwain School is irrelevant unless the deal that's been in place falls through?
As far as I know, I think that's still going forward. I'm just not quite sure what the time frame is of that starting, as I know the group, but
About a year.
it's working on the funding for it. Frank, maybe you can speak to it more?
Be about a year before we really see something happening. They're looking for funding, they're getting state and federal money in that project. So
I think they have one funding issue that they have to address, and it takes about 6 months.
Okay. Okay, if you could move on, Fiona, we'll look at how.
Oh, I have one more point. I was absolutely surprised and disappointed that there was a very low percentage, and it didn't change, in terms of support the efforts of the Housing Trust. No, it's the other one. It's the
Fire screen guys?
It was the town. The thing was implement the town's housing production plan.
Yeah.
It was incredibly low, and I don't know if it's a lack of knowledge about what that plan is, if it's something that we don't need to pay attention to. It's pretty disappointing that that's not rising to the surface.
So I do kind of address that a bit on how I'm suggesting we condense some of the strategies, because so the implementing the town's housing production plan and updating it at regular intervals, there are you know, just like I believe it was it Kevin talking about connecting to the downtown plan, connecting to the housing production plan, where, you know, it already has goals and suggestions in it that if we say implement the town's housing production plan, I was able to eliminate the support the efforts of the Affordable Housing Trust because that's in the housing production plan. It explicitly states that. It also explicitly states encouraging, we received a comment about the need for public education about 40B and affordable housing in general. That's also in the housing production plan. So I think by saying implement the town's housing production plan, it covers quite a bit of that. And so referring to specifics from that plan will be a helpful way to kind of cover some of those bases. The other things, you know, in terms of condensing, I struggled with this one. So you'll notice there are 2 red bullets on the left on the current strategies. So creating affordable housing units through adaptive reuse of existing buildings and adopting infill zoning for housing creation. Those are 2 different things, but I think the idea of, if you look on the right side, how it's kind of combined by creative retrofit of structures and neighborhoods. So the neighborhoods idea, that's infill zoning to fulfill a variety of housing needs. So it's not just talking about affordable housing. It's also talking about, you know, senior housing or really any kind of housing need as much as possible, rather than building new structures, because that was a common, you know, complaint in the open responses. We already have too many buildings that aren't being used, or, you know, so opportunities for creative retrofit of existing structures and neighborhoods. I tried to consolidate those. And then the other one that was consolidated down was the last 2 bullets. Oh yeah, so my lovely typo on the 4th bullet down on the right-hand side, but adopting zoning to incentivize the creation of senior housing, affordable housing, housing for people with disabilities, you know, that when we talk about inclusionary zoning on the left-hand side, that's where a certain percentage of new development has to be affordable. You know, then there was also the adopt zoning to incentivize the creation of senior housing. So just the idea, and I feel like we originally had those strategies kind of together and then we separated them. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are about kind of bringing them back together, basically using zoning to incentivize housing for, you know, vulnerable populations, just as a general strategy. So that's what I thought could maybe be somewhat combined. If anyone has thoughts. Or not, you don't have to have thoughts just yet, but.
I have thoughts, but I'm waiting for other people and I'm trying to figure out exactly what I want to say.
Okay.
Well, I don't know if our zoning specifically specifies, you know, areas for senior development or areas for affordable housing. I think obviously we've got our residential A, B, and stuff like that. I just don't know if we specifically, you know, mention definitive areas for senior housing or other things like that.
No, but there's ways, and you know, Judy will be hopping on our meeting when she has a public hearing for another project right now, but when she hops on, she might be able to explain better than I, but there are ways that zoning, not necessarily that you're saying, you know, in this part of town or that part of town, or this is where the affordable housing goes or things like that, but just to incentivize the creation of such housing. Inclusionary zoning is one such way of doing that.
Well, the question I have finally figured out how to ask.
Okay.
Is, I absolutely believe in infill and inclusionary zoning as a tool to help keep our affordable housing percentages up. But the question I have is that going to be addressed in the zoning revision, or is that something that this then would drive the zoning revision? It's to me, it's an essential element. Aim.
So, you know, given that, I guess
that's the question for Jennifer.
Oh, sorry.
You're asking me if inclusionary zoning is in the zoning right now?
It's not there now. I think it needs to be. So I'm questioning where this may be one of those places that an action is to get the inclusionary zoning into the master plan, to the zoning.
Yeah, so I would say that you should probably make that an implementation recommendation as part of the master plan. It's not proposed under the current revision of the zoning at this time.
Great. I'm glad you said that because I agree with it. It needs to be an implementation.
Any other housing thoughts?
Start with implement the town's housing production plan and update at regular intervals rather than partner with.
That's a good idea, actually, because that, now the
It doesn't set the right stage because people read the first goal and they may or may not get further. And this one kind of I'd like it see it in the middle or lower part of the list.
So the only reason I had it in this order currently was just based on the ranking, but I agree for terms of what makes sense in order, that wouldn't, having the housing production plan.
And we'll have to screen through all these to make sure because people do, even though you don't rank order them,
Mm-hmm.
you could say this is highest and lowest priority. We could do that down the road.
Well, also, I think people, even if we say it's not in any order, just naturally, when you're reading, that's kind of just how your brain takes it in. So we do want to
Agreed.
be that regardless.
Thank you.
All right, so we could move on. Thank you. All right, so economic development. There weren't any flip in terms of what the top 5 were, order they were in. There was a 3% decrease in people who thought that we should have encourage mixed use development. So the only time I would point out an increase or a decrease, by the way, is for like 3% or more. If it was 1 or 2%, I didn't feel the need to point it out. So that order did not change. Fiona, if you wouldn't mind. Okay, so this was, like I said before, the section that had the most amount of increased open responses. So I will give you a moment to read over those.
Mm.
I don't think there's any part of this. So point 3.
I think Matt's in and out.
Yeah, Matt is in and out. I did notice in just the general sense of people wanting a bigger variety of businesses, that comes up as well in the cultural element, which at first I was like, did this person put this in the wrong place? But then I realized, no, if in order for Bridgewater to be a cultural hub, it's going to tie into the sort of businesses that people come to see. So
I don't see a lot of stuff we haven't heard before.
mm-hmm.
I'm trying to figure out if there's some nugget in there that that kind of gets to the issues, but I struggle with some of this stuff, no more nail and washing dries. Well, that's not up to the town necessarily. We can't zone specific things.
True, but in recruitment, there's ways you can incentivize, make businesses want to come, so I think we kind of talk about that a bit in the economic development chapter, but
I saw Matt just sent out a note.
oh, messaging what it can do to right along with that.
I don't know what to make. I have to really think, and maybe after I read the economic development chapter, maybe I can make more sense out of this and think about what the strategy is. Or maybe you've already done that.
Well, Fiona, would you mind moving to the next screen? Thanks. So this was the one I had the hardest time with figuring out how to revise. But I did want to just emphasize that comments really talk about how important it is that downtown is the focus that is going to draw people to Bridgewater, and how can we make it a place people want to come to? And so even though you already read what's in quotation marks on the bottom right, to me this just jumped out. Bridgewater having a vibrant downtown with retail, restaurants at full occupancy and attracting other businesses to town should be the top priority. just that particular comment jumped out at me.
I know that the past few weekends, the Common has been fairly active on Saturday mornings with some of there's been protests or standouts every Saturday. And I actually, there was a few conversations I had with some people who didn't realize how nice the Common was. Like some of the conversations I had, people were like, wow, I never realized how big this Common is and how it's like, I want to bring my family down here, because they only think of it driving around. But
Mm-hmm.
when there were people there walking,
Mm-hmm.
I got I heard a lot of conversations about how it's actually a nice like downtown, and they would like to come down there.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
No, you go. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, like it's one of those things where when you talk to everyone about it, like I'll be like, yeah, it has that potential. It has that it really could be a place to come down. But
Right. And just as an outsider who's visited Bridgewater, I can attest to that. It's a really cool area. However, it is scary walking to it. So it's kind of this conflict of people might appreciate it. I think it's more safe getting to it.
I agree with what Steve just said and what you just said. I really appreciate the blue one on the right. I think that's a great objective. People are working on issues around that, but I'm thinking of more in the strategy. There's nothing really in there right now, and maybe we can pull it together. You guys can pull it together, but it really has how to incentivize. It's not that we need to. The strategy has to be, how do you do that? Mm-hmm. And I don't know how to write that off the cuff, but putting something in there as a strategy is we know from the last meeting, and very clearly, and hopefully the economic development section will say that, we do not have enough parcels that are big enough to really move our economic percentages to a higher number. I think sustaining the number we have is going to be a challenge because of that space limitation. Elm Street, and maybe later if rezoning happens, but I'm just trying to think of a way to, somebody says identify incentives for businesses, that kind of thing. I think there has to be some kind of strategy around that. And I don't know other than that, I don't know what to say. I know people are working on stuff, but we're trying to put this together for the next 10 years. And there's an urgency in the first 4 or 5 years. So
one of the things that was done, Carlton and guys, was with Jennifer's predecessor in the Economic Development Office, we had set up. I believe Sue was involved with it too. We had a downtown business committee meeting that met a couple, 2, 3 times, trying to gather together the property owners and the business owners of the downtown, trying to address some of these things. So that might be something indirectly that we could, put with the strategy is, to work toward having the vibrant downtown with putting together a committee of downtown businesses and property owners that can work toward this goal. Possibly being headed by, Jennifer in the Economic Development Office of the town. I thought it was going in a good direction. A couple, 2, 3 years ago, we were getting some good turnout with business owners and property owners. I think we're not going to be able to make any strides in that direction again until we bring those people together and figure out what they're willing to do to invest in their properties, and figure out what they're trying to rent their property to see if it's within reason, because they're asking way too much rent for any potential business coming in, then we're never going to see those storefronts filled. So to organize meetings and discussions of that meeting, that situation is the only way you're going to start building up the downtown again. So I think we need to trend back in that direction, and hopefully that will happen.
Yeah. I think what we have to do is take a look and try to find out why we have all those places empty, even before the coronavirus hit. People were coming in and out of there like I don't know, like a revolving door, and just never. Some of them just months and they were gone. Some of them been there for a long time. They're gone. What caused it?
I agree.
Was it the traffic? Was it the lack of people coming in? Was it the new ownership of the buildings? Those are the kinds of things I'm talking about. You know, did
All
their
of the-
rent skyrocket and they can't, you know, just wasn't worth being there anymore? Things like
So
that. That's what we have
all
to
of
get.
the above, Frank, I'd love to have a side discussion with you. I'm guessing I'm the only one that's tried to actually purchase land in the commercial business district in the last 12 months and doing my analyses on buying the land, putting up a building, how many parking spots will I have, what kind of rent could I get for my commercial, what kind of rent could I get for my residential. I go, this is a waste of my time. Why me? I'll never invest in Bridgewater. It just there's nothing here for somebody that wants to invest. There's other towns that, you know, just have, and this is not necessarily the town's fault, just more desirable pieces of land that are more ready to be, you know, developed, and you get a return on your money. You know, there's just not a lot of opportunities here. I've looked at least 6 places, and I don't get very far because I do my preliminary analyses and there's just no opportunity. It's not worth, I'm going to lose money.
Those are all really good points. And what it's driving my mind to, I think the strategy has to be something along the line of develop a marketing plan, I don't want to use the word strategy, but somehow we have to come up with a way to market Bridgewater in different places as a whole and in different places from the commercial economic development perspective. And I don't know what's happening in that front, but I think it rises to the top as one of the strategies, and the goal is to complete a marketing, either a marketing study, complete a marketing plan that includes a study. I know a lot of studies. Oakland only did a study for the downtown from an economic perspective. I haven't read it for 4 years or so, but we have that document to feed off of. But
I think that, okay.
Very many people know they did that study. And it was current, as I say, 3 or 4 years ago.
What study is that, Carlton?
I'll have to look it up and find it. Maybe Jennifer has easy access to it or knowledge of it, but it was part of they did downtowns. They followed the 2014 plan. They were commissioned, or they had money to do a study, and they did some traffic counts, and they also looked at the marketability and the draw area from the town where that came from. And that's in a report that I'll have to find and send to you.
There's a 2014 and a 2016.
There may be a maybe 2016. It's Old Colony Planning Council.
You're right.
And that one needs to pay attention because they had some suggestions. But my point is going to the higher level. We have a goal. Now we need the strategy, objective, and that is to develop a strong Bridgewater economic development program. I don't like plan. I like program.
So I do know that the university does want to work with the town on economic development. It's something that my vice president and Fred has talked about for quite some time. And Fred has visited some college towns and has encouraged Michael and others to visit some other college towns. They're really interested in doing that. I don't know how we get started on that, but I know there's people on campus that would like to work with the town on that.
I think the way we get started is, Sue, and thank you for that comment. I think the way we get started is putting in this plan so we have a reference point to go back and say, what are you doing about this every year? What are you doing about this?
Mm-hmm. So we did get a comment about questioning about how Bridgewater, how BSU ties in with economic development. And I just wanted to point out, and Sue, you had pointed this out to us a couple meetings ago, that BSU's current strategic plan has as one of their goals to lead alignment on workforce development and related educational needs for community and students. They have as one of their goals, to serve as a regional catalyst for economic, cultural, and intellectual engagement. So the strategy might be kind of vague, but I think when we get into specific recommendations, it would be collaborating with BSU they already have this as their own goal as well. You know, there's clearly an interest that they're taking seriously and figuring out how to foster that. So
Exactly.
Yeah, Alexis, I just want to echo that because, you know, way back when we were doing the core assessment meetings, this was an overlapping theme as well. So, you know, I just want to echo that.
thank you.
It's one thing I saw, I've seen other towns do. This is regarding the downtown with the empty storefronts. Maybe having like some of these storefronts that are just empty, they could rent out or allow the front blank spaces to artists to show off their like to have display their work. What that could do is not only does it give interest to the downtown, it might bring people walking around the town. It might instead of just looking like a whole downtown that nobody wants to go to because everything's empty, it gives it that temporary vitality. So that's something that could be something that at least gives Bridgewater a perception of it's an active downtown rather than a dying downtown.
Do you know of any communities, like, I'm just, that like we could look at as an example of that, or?
I think New Bedford did it, because they have New Bedford, they have it's like the second Tuesday of every month. It's AHA night. It's an amazing night. But I think they started off kind of renting out just kind of empty storefronts, and you'd walk by and there would be just like paintings or sculptures in it, and it just gave that sense of like there's something going on here. I'll look up a few different examples and I'll try to send those out to you. But I think I've seen it done before, and it's been fairly successful to kind of give that sense of like a live downtown. It might draw in businesses that say, "Oh, people are coming downtown."
The other thing that we've talked about on campus is to do pop-up stores in some of those empty storefronts and have our students run, you know, whatever it is, some kind of pop-up store, and whether it's selling art or, you know, we have a lot of students that are very entrepreneurial. So, you know, there's things that we could do that would help bring people to the downtown and not make it look as empty.
Well, I think it ultimately gets back to the fact that we need a collaborative meeting. I think, as you pointed out, Sue, with BSU, with Jen in our economic development office, and trying to pull these building owners and business owners together in those meetings like we used to have at the 99 or at other locations at the bank, and then just start pulling ideas and things together. And, you know, maybe their resources at BSU can say, hey, what is a good going rate for office space in downtown Bridgewater right now? What, you know, owners to these buildings, what kind of businesses would you like to see? What would BSU like to see businesses for their students that could pull them to the downtown? And that's the kind of brainstorming and network I think needs to happen in order to take the proper steps forward and get the businesses in that we need. But I think it's going to take a collaboration between the town, BSU, and reaching out to these business owners and building owners and pulling them all together in a meeting and saying, you know, what can we do to work toward getting this done? Because if we don't do that, we're just going to continue to flounder and see what we're seeing right now.
I actually had hired an intern at the beginning of the spring semester to actually do just that. Go to the businesses, talk to the business owners, see who is interested in bringing back that downtown business group that you talked about, Kevin. And he had started that project, and then all of a sudden COVID-19 and everything just stopped. And he ended up doing a different type of presentation for me that didn't involve going to the businesses and talking. But when he got started, everybody was very excited about it. And that's what, you know, from our campus perspective, we'd love to see that. We'd love to see the businesses, you know, show that they're more of a college town. And, you know, how can we do that? Can we get them to wear BSU t-shirts, wear the bear on Wednesday, and things like that?
Those are great ideas. I'd love to have you find another student and do that project over again. Jennifer, what's your thoughts on that?
We actually, in my office, have been talking about restarting that Downtown Business Association or business group that you had mentioned earlier. And I had, before COVID hit and we all went our separate ways for a while, I had asked my assistant Jasmine to start collecting names and contact information of downtown business owners and downtown property owners so that we could get something started. So I'm hoping that now that things are sort of back to some sort of even keel and somewhat business as usual, we'll get that project up and running again.
Oh, that sounds great.
I don't want to forget at all what Ken said. He's taken a look at the downtown, and there are not the finances don't line up when he does his analysis.
There's no way to make money, period, unless you got really deep pockets and can really pull off some significant investment. But you know, somebody that's looking to invest $500,000 to $2 million next, you can't. There's no money. You can't make any money. It's impossible.
Ken, I appreciate that, and I want us to recognize that. And if you get a group talking together, you've got to recognize that sometimes the numbers don't work well, and how we're going to fix that, how we're going to change that, what are we going to do about that as a town, and particularly for this document that we're working on.
Mm.
And there could be some implementation things that pop out of it, but I love the idea. But at some point, we have to have something that we can go back to as a control point and say, in 3 years, have we done anything about this? I spent, since 2014, when we updated the master plan in 2014 in 3 chapters, I spent an enormous amount of time trying to track what was done, because at that time it was a master plan implementation committee and we were supposed to track that. And it was very difficult to get anybody to act on the strategies, because it wasn't.
I think having that committee meeting that the college and that the town are talking about, because it sounds like they're talking about a similar thing. I think you'd be surprised how much good info in real executable information will come out of having 10 business owners in a room. I belong to a mastermind group that I go to every month. There's 6 of us, different industries, and you can come away with, you know, unbelievable amounts of info. So if we put a group together that was sole purpose was to try to get the downtown area filled back up, I think there's going to be positive momentum. And if the town, business, people, and college were part of that association, I don't think you need more than a dozen people to really some ideas that were executable that will, to your point, Carlton, at least get us going in the right direction.
Well, what you're saying even rings more true with me. If it's bottom-up driven, it will go somewhere. If it's top-down driven, we will likely fail.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those meetings would definitely have to, you know, come up with true costs, like he was saying, and potentially the town can come in and say, hey, maybe we can offer this tax incentive to this business owner or this property owner, you know, redirect some things or whatever it might be to, you know, to create that buzz to try and get something done. That's why I think we need to have that multi-pronged approach with the town, with those business owners, with BSU, because we want to drive those students up to those businesses. I think all those heads have to come together to try and come up with some ideas and solutions, because everyone individually, like you say, is just, you're not going to come up with the answers or the finances needed to put those businesses in place. It's just too costly.
I don't know what's going on with the development piece. I don't know what's going on there, but I've given up. I don't think the guy's going to come forward with anything. I think he's just sitting there. Maybe it's a tax write-off for him or something. But that is I'm getting to the point of being one of those people that speak very harshly and negatively about the lack of movement on that. And we need to fix that soon.
Where was this, Carlton, that you're referring to?
The Broad Street, where the houses down, and that blight, that terrible blight. Nothing's happening there that I know of.
Frank, do you know anything what's happening on that right now?
Could Jennifer tell us if he drew out the permits to start building?
So he has almost all of his application to the planning board. He's missing one piece that he knows what he needs to provide, and we're just waiting for him to provide that one piece. Everything else is in my office, ready for review.
So when could he potentially break ground over there, Jennifer, once he gets that in?
Well, if he got it, I mean, it just depends. He has to go before the planning board for a special permit. So, I mean, I would say the earliest you'll probably see somebody breaking ground there will be the fall.
Okay.
We'll look forward to it.
But that's if he gets in what he's supposed to get in. So don't quote me.
I'm going to quote you, say he hasn't delivered.
Well, he has in the past made commitments to timeframes and then not kept up with them.
That is
Just ignored
correct.
them, you know.
Totally
So
does that.
we're hoping because he's made progress in putting in the plans and the ideas and things that he's going to do, that he will keep going forward with it. They've already emptied out a couple of places there they're getting ready to knock down. So
Well, nobody knows that. Quite frankly. To the point, I think Alexa and I hope this discussion leads you to some kind of help in terms of that market program or whatever. You know, we're on this cusp of something's going to happen before we publish this, and then is it really relevant? But we need something to sustain, something that's sustainable. Thank you.
I think the biggest thing to add, Alexis, is maybe a collaboration between the town, BSU, and, you know, downtown business owners and building owners to reach that goal that you've written down there at the bottom of the vibrant downtown and full occupancy. And I think that's going to be the best way to address that goal that you've got listed.
Okay, thank you.
My preference, if it can be put in there, it's got to be a non-formal thing. I'm not going to go to something with the town and the college that's a open town meeting with rules and regular. No, I want to go talk to people and say, how can I invest this money in Bridgewater? Because I'm very close to spending it in Stoughton.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. I live here. I want to invest here. And, you know, I'm going to have to do it 15 minutes down the road. And I'd rather not.
If it's not a posted, it doesn't have to be posted. It can be an ad hoc group that is brainstorming ideas for Bridgewater.
Yeah, I like that. I love that.
Okay. All right. That's funny. Sorry.
Hey, sorry. I'm sorry because I was a late addition to the meeting, and this is my first one. Should I hold any questions towards the end, or because I had a couple questions about some of the comments that were just made.
Are you an interested resident? We would just need your name and address for the record.
Sure. My name is Susie Robinson.
Yep.
And I am both an interested resident, and I'm also a relatively newly appointed member of the Financial Committee of the Town of Bridgewater.
Okay. And your address?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm very excited. This stuff I'm very excited about and interested in.
Awesome.
So, Jennifer, what's the rules on that from a public perspective?
I mean, we're pretty informal here. So, I mean, if the committee doesn't have an issue, if it's a question about this topic, I would say that we could let her ask the question now if there's no issue with that. If the committee doesn't have an issue with that.
That's great.
Good to me.
Okay,
Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, I'm a resident. I've been here about 8 years. And in terms of my involvement with the Financial Committee,
You're breaking up.
I'm lost to Susie.
was newly appointed this year and only recently really kind of getting into, all right, is that any better? Of course, bad internet connection. Is it any better?
Yes.
Okay. Just being more recently involved with the meetings with the Financial Committee, I am trying to get more educated around some of the other groups that are working in the town on different initiatives. And this one in particular is, of course, of great interest. I was just curious from the background, I think the idea of bringing together some folks from the town, from BSU, and then certainly some of these small business owners together, who has kind of led those conversations or coordinated those kind of conversations in the past? And I guess I would also ask, what's sort of stopping us from doing that now? Well, I mean, other than the COVID situation, but you know, what's kind of stalled that?
Well, I believe it came from the Community Economic Development Office originally, but I think COVID has definitely been your preventative force going on right now. As Jennifer said, I think she was looking to get it started again, which is great. So when we can start gathering more than 10 or more people together in the near future, hopefully we can get this off and running again.
Right.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks.
I think well-run Zoom meetings also can facilitate that. I've been pleased with a lot of the meetings I've been in.
That'd be good to Zoom. If we want to start it with
Agree
the
with
Zoom,
that.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, and to me, I know, we're probably going to move on to the next slide, but I mean, sitting back as a business person who's desperately looking to invest some money somewhere, I heard Steve wants to get some artists to have some space. I heard the college wants to have these little pilot programs so some entrepreneurial students could, have a space to learn how to be an entrepreneur. I'd love to invest. If somebody could tell me how I can make money to believe in those ideas, I'd love to do them both, how do we schedule a meeting to start talking about that? I'm sure there's some types of businesses that the town would prefer to have in town. Because quite frankly, this is like giving me a little bit of hope. Just having a meeting sounds optimistic to me. So I'd love to set that up. I'm not sure how we do that, but
I'll talk with my vice president and I'll see if we can get something going.
that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so
And I'm meeting with the town hall study group that fairly soon. It's an ad hoc group, and that's something where just bringing up like different ideas for that, just that downtown, how that can help out with economic development. So I'll bring that up in some questions.
Maybe
Great.
you can even go.
Yeah.
the biggest thing you probably have to get to that meeting is the owner of those buildings. So
Yeah,
gotta get the owner of those buildings over to that meeting and
I
see
agree.
what their thoughts are as well.
Unfortunately, one of the owners of the buildings downtown is a professor at BSU, and the president already spoke with him, and he has no interest in talking about it.
That's the
Right?
problem. Like, how do I buy guys like that out? And there's just no opportunity, It's like,
Well,
we're not going to change the facade of the downtown with the same old, same old. And unless you got money bags, you can't squeeze these guys out. So that's exactly what I'm running up against.
You have to find willing owners that are, ready to do something. So
Yeah.
whether the town comes in at that point in time to help out with that, I don't know. That's a discussion that needs to be had, and
Yeah.
the rights of the town to move forward and try and get this downtown developed.
Yeah.
that's an interesting challenge. That's all I'll say.
No doubt.
Okay. So, it's, I guess, not surprising this brought the most discussion because, as I pointed out, it brought the most new open responses from the public as well. So this was really, really helpful. Okay, so Fiona, do you want to move on to natural cultural resources? So nothing major shifted here. The one that had the biggest increase was improving access to parks and open space and wayfinding to connect open space resources. So if you wouldn't mind moving on again, Fiona, I'll just display the comments. So there are 5 new comments on this. So that first one is what I was talking about, where I thought to myself, did they put this in the wrong place? They must have meant this for economic development. But no, I think, it shows that tie-in of, making Bridgewater a cultural hub would require some change in what the businesses are downtown. So I'll let you be the best.
Wow.
Oh, okay, Matt. Steve, Matt just put you on the spot here.
Hey, glad to be on the spot. Well, I know that one of the highlights recently, Styles and Hart Parkland, which is right behind the Burlington Coat Factory. It kind of goes from Broad Street and High Street. Just recently, in the past year, the Community Preservation Committee gave money, was able to give money towards purchasing land to create a parking area to make that accessible. So that is a downtown park that has been neglected for years with a lot of history. And it's getting a lot more attention right now. And currently there's actually there's been some groups that have gotten together to clear out the trails, create new bridges inside the park. It's been very exciting. And but I think as far as like other parks like Carver's Pond, right before this meeting, I just got back from there. I think that it's the more people know about these places, the safer they're going to feel about being there, because I've walked through Styles and Hart, which when it was overgrown, and you run into some camps like tents and stuff every so often. But for the most part, I think when it comes to say like Carver's Pond, that's had a steward and a few stewards, and every time I go there, I feel very safe with my daughter, and we'll go for walks in there. I think because we now have a park steward, environmental, there's just one hired. I see potential for these parks to be much safer and much more used.
Okay. Well, that's
Yeah, I actually agree with that. I've met with Stephen Sobel, the new environmental planner, along with Kitty Doherty, who's a very involved community person. And we've talked about these parklands and bringing more attention to them and getting the college involved with our students. And that was another thing we had planned, was to get our students involved with helping to clear the trails at Styles and Hart. But with everything happening, that hasn't been done yet. But it is still something that we really want to get involved with. And we have people on campus that are excited about doing that. And I agree about Carver's Pond. I go there all the time, and I actually have not run into any questionable characters. It's a really great place. The Friends of Carver's Pond do a great job stewarding that pond.
But you're not there at 2 in.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to be there at 2 in.
Right, dusk to dawn.
That's very good points. I see
Or dawn to dusk, sorry.
the second bullet and the fourth bullet, I think, are probably major take-homes. I know we have limited, in future will be even more limited for a while, budgets in terms of the Parks and Rec Department. And unless you have funding and that results in actual people who get paid to deal with and maintain these things, I don't think you get very far. But we have an extremely poor record, an embarrassing record in terms of maintaining our parks. We were given a playground. The only condition was you take care of the playground. And we have not done that. And so it's now in decay. And that's the kind of thing we have to figure out how to address in this plan. Again, it's a plan, but at some point there's implementation, and money is always a part of that play. But somehow the balance has to be gotten into the town so people can actually say, oh, that park is great. My town takes care of its property.
okay. Sorry, was someone else about to chime in? Thought I heard a yeah. Fiona, could you move forward? Thank you. Okay, so I just take a minute to process the color coding. Oops. That's okay. So you're on, can you go back to open space? Yep, back again. Back one more. There you go.
Thank you. My only comment on the provide, I like what I see at first read, and it didn't change hugely, but the only major issue I'm concerned with is encouraging stewardship and volunteer support is a wonderful thing, but volunteers are as good as the volunteers are. And lots of times volunteers are there one time, but not another. And I think we have to have a stronger statement in this strategy.
Okay.
I think encouraging stewardship is great, but that's a sub-theme in terms of what I think we have to do is that management of the parks and open space and parklands through an active Parks and Rec department, whatever.
So you want to assign stewardship to a particular part of the town and then have them reach forward and ask for volunteer support and other things.
You know, volunteers are great to have, but if you can't engage them or don't engage them, or they engage, but then they feel like they're not effectively managed or moved forward, they're not going to come back.
Mm.
Well, I agree. I think, someone like Parks and Rec, or in conjunction with, forestry, which is, under public services now, is something that definitely should get together and head it, and then arrange, Boy Scout troops or whatever it might be along those lines that need service hours, or students, or, hey, let's go in for a day and let's do some cleanup type of thing. But it needs to be headed by a particular part of town that can oversee it.
Actually, I just noticed just recently noticed an upgrade at one of the parks at the Ironworks Park. There's a historical marker that talks about the explosion that happened in the history of Ironworks Park. And I think that the signage got replaced recently because it's legible now. For a while, you couldn't even read it. Does anyone happen to know who was responsible for that?
I know Steve Black is the steward.
Okay.
And I don't know who put the old iron pouring ingot out there. Somebody just put it there, and I have no idea. I've asked him. It just showed up.
Yeah. We have good resources happening. We just don't know who's doing it.
Right.
Might have been an Eagle Scout project for a scout. Who knows? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
Lots of those.
Yep. No, and they're great projects that these kids, grab and do, and replace signage and clear trails and stuff like that. So it's wonderful that we see the scouts do stuff like that. And that's, the big volunteerism thing I think that you'll see. But I think someone needs to head that, either, like I say, a town department, Parks and Rec department, or things along those lines. So we should maybe direct that, in your strategy here.
Mm.
Is there something more in here that we're missing in terms of cultural resources, looking at the revised strategies?
Yep. Yeah. So I'm looking at my version on my computer right now. And so under what you have on your screen, underneath the encourage resident interaction with underneath that bullet, there was a bullet, encourage stewardship and volunteer support to maintain open space and cultural resources. And I had it as the red color. And so that's what it was combined with for provide the second bullet on the right. So when I send out the PDF of the PowerPoint, I'll make sure that I just added that bullet in on my end. But yeah, I can see it got cut when I was condensing.
What I'm trying to say is I see this as sort of marketing for overall, but it doesn't, I guess it goes back to the economic development section, and they're interlinked, as we said way back when we started this a year and a half ago. I'm just missing something. I have to think about it more. It just seems like not strong enough in terms of cultural resources and open space strategies.
Okay. Well, yes, please do continue to think about it. And my plan is, so after this meeting, I'm going to take the notes Fiona and I are both taking, and I'm going to once I PDF the slideshow, I'm going to add in some of the comments that people have already given. I don't want to change the slideshow in any way. I want to make sure you're getting, what we've discussed, but I'll add them as comments, and then ask you to send back any further thoughts. I think that'll be the best way to proceed.
Are you going to make revisions on the side here, or I don't quite follow what
So
you're...
what would be, in the past, the way I guess I would, people would just send an email to Jennifer with their comments on the things that I asked to give feedback on from the meeting.
Mhm.
So, I mean, the same is fine. If you want me to, I'm trying to think of how else I could do it. Let me think on that, okay? I want to make it as easy as possible for people to give feedback. So.
But are our comments tonight getting captured somehow?
Oh yeah, Fiona and I are both taking notes.
So you'll include those. That's
Yep.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
But Alexis, I don't know if this revised strategy is in order of importance for you or not, but I do think it would be a little bit, more important to figure out a way to get more of this information on the town's website and of that importance. As it was described, a lot of people don't know where some of these places are located. But I think that would be a really important part of this, is to get more information out there through the town website to let people know about these spaces.
Yeah, I had a question about that. So the last bullet, and again, I don't think of it in terms of order of how, what we are saying is most important. I was just ranking it by the survey for now, and we can discuss order later. But improve the use of the town's website to promote access to public open space and cultural resources. If you look at the color coding, there was a strategy, update the town's inventory of significant cultural locations. I don't want to lose sight of that. So the town has an inventory and it should be clearly accessible on the website. So I wanted to kind of build those two together. So, because I agree that it's funny, the website and access has come up repeatedly in these elements. So I think that is an interesting thing to look at.
Is that improving the town's website, is that an action to the strategy of preserve and promote the awareness of cultural resources? The one that's in blue?
Okay, good question. So right now, these are all just strategies. If we were to, when we get to recommendations and implementation, and I guess that's when you would get into more specifics. Okay, well, how are you going to improve the town's website? I could see that being more of a recommendation than a strategy. For now, I'll probably leave it there until I get more comments back.
Go ahead.
Oh, that's it.
I was looking at the update the town's inventory of significant cultural locations. Cultural or historic, or both?
Well, that would be the NACRIS database.
So you're talking historic more than cultural? Because my point is, NACRIS has almost every town and every house, building in town, and many of the elements of the town that have historic significance that are listed.
Up till 1983.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Well, no, we did that update in 1998. My point is that I was working on something the last week, and I came to understand that the state considers anything that's older than 50 years as having historical potential or consequence. The town zoning was a big argument, and they set the date as anything historical in the town was 1925. And that's inconsistent with the policy of the state's historic preservation recommendations. This comes out of the Community Preservation Act and the Department of Revenue's interpretation, and says that it should be 50 years. So my point is, inventory of significant cultural locations, I think, could become an implementation piece, but I don't want to lose that. Let me put it that way. I don't want to lose that.
Okay.
I had to think on the fly here while I was doing that.
Yep. Okay. Any more comments on this, or shall we move on to public facilities?
No.
All right. Okay, Fiona, take it away. Okay, so, oops, sorry, I lost my Zoom screen. Where did you go? Give me 1 sec, sorry. Okay, so yeah, the biggest increases, the biggest increase was in the, to solicit resident input about satisfaction at regular intervals. And then the biggest decrease was employing green infrastructure design in town-owned properties to reduce flow to surface waters and sewer systems. It still was one of the top 5, but just wanted to point out that increase and decrease. Fiona, next slide, please. And thank you. Okay. So in terms of new comments for public facilities and services, these were the new comments: better monitoring of drinking water, and stop spending on things that would benefit workers, such as town office buildings, and start spending money on things that benefit the citizens. And then this last one, whew, get our money back if the roof falls in. So yeah.
Yeah, those kind of comments are not constructive.
I didn't want to omit, you know, I don't want to be the judge of what gets omitted, but so I wanted to share them with you. And you should have all of these comments as well, but these were the new ones.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. In terms of condensing, where am I at here? Okay, so I thought that the first 2 bullets in the current strategies could potentially be condensed. So if we're talking about evaluating the necessity of existing services and identifying new services that may be needed, that can be tied in with soliciting resident input, you know, about satisfaction with and the need for municipal facilities and services at regular intervals. So I thought that might be a way to condense. And I really didn't, based on, you know, this is the section that really has had not substantial amounts of outside feedback with open responses, which means we must have just nailed those strategies from the beginning, or maybe not. But so yeah, any thoughts on this section?
I like the solicit resident input. I think that's an incredibly important statement, and I really like the solicit and solicit in a good way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So okay, if anyone can think of other ways to condense or adjust, you can let me know. But we can probably move on then. Okay. So you guys got the economic development inventory and assessment today, and along with that, Judy sent the comments resolution matrix, which basically allows you to put your comment and then allows us to, you know, at the end, when all of the inventory and assessments, when you get your, you'll see how comments were addressed, whether we accepted them, partially accepted, or rejected, and how we dealt with them. So if you need a refresher on how to use that, please let me know. But we're asking if you could get comments back for that by Monday, June 29th. That would be helpful, just so we can see them for a discussion point for the July meeting. We wanted to get the housing one out to you as well, but we're having a little bit of a hold up updating some of the information in it. So I'm going to be a little loose on a little wiggle room there by mid-July, housing and public facilities services, inventory and assessments. And then the deadline for those. The rest of this is the same as it was the last time we met, that the recommendations and the implementation will have a working paper by the end of August for you. So we're not, you know, when you get the next meeting agenda, we'll highlight what we're going to talk about, but it's, you know, going to be in part related to comments from your inventory, economic development comments. So what I would like, and I'm realizing now I didn't put on the schedule, I'm going to need a couple of days to kind of get your notes all integrated from these comments, and take this PowerPoint, make it a PDF with kind of the takeaways from tonight's meeting, and then I'll send it out to you and ask for any feedback as to how strategies might need to be consolidated more or reworded or anything like that. But I think we're really like getting these nicely, nicely worded. So I will talk to Judy about when we'll need those comments back on the strategies. For now, I'll just I'll try and get it to you in the next couple of days.
What happened to our mid-July meeting?
So our July meeting, we're sticking with the second Monday.
It's
So
not-
so
July
I think it's
13th.
the 13th.
yeah.
13th, yeah.
Yeah, so I believe we should have a calendar invite. Thank you to Jennifer.
Yeah, I sent all the calendar invites like last month, I think.
Yep. So I apologize that it's not on the schedule. This was more just like a deliverable schedule, but yes.
Okay.
So we'll have our next meeting July 13th.
And we know the topic of that meeting?
It's going to be, well, we'll be talking about the comments you gave us on the strategies.
Okay.
And then also, I'm going to confirm with Judy, but I assume also the economic development kind of comments and things like that. Okay.
Because I'm looking ahead at your schedule, and I don't see us having it. Is that submission of final plan to this committee, or is that to the town? What?
I'll have to ask Judy for clarification. When I send out the strategies for you to give feedback on, I'll try and get that. I'll get more information for you on that.
I just see a very big bottleneck and very little time between 1st and November 16th to actually do a complete, seriously, a complete review of the draft or master plan.
Okay.
And have comments come back. I've done this, in the close to 100 times. I've done this with this kind of document, and I think that's really cutting it close.
Okay. I will pass that along to Judy. I imagine she'll also want to start.
I know it's probably contractual, but you're really putting the guns on us to come up and review a draft or master plan, not leaving much in the way of comments between October 24th when we have a public presentation and November 16th. It's just too tight.
Okay. So Carlton, I imagine that at the July meeting, we're probably, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but we're probably also going to start to talk about implementation and some of the things that would be in the working paper for August. So hopefully that eases a bit of your anxiety, but I will let her know. I hear what you're saying, that October 24th to November 16th is, I'll discuss that and let you know.
I appreciate that. I'm just more concerned about the overall, it almost feels really rushed, and I don't want to feel that way.
Okay. I will pass that along.
Thank you.
All right. So does anyone have any questions? Okay. All right. So you'll hear from me or Fiona or Judy in the next couple of days. And look forward to your feedback on those strategies. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Susie, for joining in. You too, Pete.
Oh, yes. Thank you. All right. Have a good night, everybody.